when you're getting to know your camera, one of the things that you want to really understand is RAW versus JPEG, and also the sensor size of your camera. So what's the difference between RAW and JPEG? Well, with RAW photos, you're getting all of the information in the sensor, right? So when you take a photo, you're getting all of the information of the photo that you took, which means that when you take that photo into your computer, you're going to be able to manipulate that photo much more than if you took a JPEG, right? So what is a JPEG? A JPEG is a compressed file, right? So you're compressing that raw data in order to save space. So let's say, for example, I have a raw file of a photo that I took outside. If I want to take that photo into post and change the brightness and change the way the mountains look, or the way that the grass looks, or the brightness of the person's face, I can do all that without losing very much quality in the image, which is phenomenal. Can you imagine taking a photo that's too dark and then properly exposing it later on in post? Well, if you have a JPEG and you try to do that, it's not going to end up working. You're going to end up getting a bunch of artifacts, and it's not going to be able to have as much dynamic range when you're making those types of changes. So understand that the difference between RAW and JPEG is that with RAW you get to do more changes, with JPEG you can't, but there's a huge trade-off in the file sizes. When you get into photo sizes, it can be the difference between 25 megabytes for a RAW file and 5 megabytes for a JPEG file. That's 5 times as much space, right, for the RAW file to the JPEG.
All right, guys, so I'm at my desk right now, and what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hop on into the computer, and I'm going to show you guys the power of RAW photography versus JPEG. I think this is really important to understand, so that way you can kind of take into consideration whether or not you want to shoot RAW or you want to shoot JPEG, and kind of make that decision for yourself. So what we're going to do is we're going to go ahead and hop into Photoshop, and I'm going to just show you the basics of making some changes to a RAW photo. Now there's so many other programs that you can use, such as Lightroom is another great program that I would normally use, but I think Photoshop's going to work great for this. So we're going to go and hop on into Photoshop right now with a RAW photo that is extremely over or underexposed. So what we'll do is we'll hop on in. Okay, so now that we have it open, you guys can see here that it's completely underexposed and it needs some work. So what I'm going to do is just show you guys the power of this. So watch what happens right here. All I'm going to do is just change the exposure a little bit. Watch this. Look at that. Look at that. All I did was just move the exposure up a bit, and look at how the image has changed so drastically. Now, normally you would not want to go up that high because you don't want to end up damaging the image. But right here, the recovery that I've made from here is unbelievable, unrealistic. I mean, when you think about how much has changed, it's amazing. And so what I can do here is I can even go further. Let's say, for example, I wanted to bring up some of the blacks a little bit more. I can do that a little bit. Let's say, for instance, I want a little bit less contrast, right? Just make a little bit less contrast. And then I want to bring up the highlights. Look at that. Just that little bit. Look at how the image has changed from this, guys. Look at where I'm going to just show you guys back to where I brought it from real quick. Let me see if I can go ahead and cancel these changes. Go back to the other exposure. Look at that. That's where it was. This is where it was right here with the exposure. And this is what I brought it to. This is all in a RAW photo here. Now, what I want to show you guys next is an example of me taking in me using a JPEG to do the same thing. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and open up a JPEG photo here in Photoshop, make those same changes. Let me make this a little bit bigger. So I made this JPEG much bigger. And now what I'm going to do is I'm going to go ahead and make some changes to this JPEG here. So the first thing that I want to do is go to my adjustments and just change the brightness, change the levels here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to bring these levels up. Okay. So we're going to bring down this, and then we're going to bring the highlights down a little bit. So you see here, I'm trying to recover some of these some of the damage that was done in that earlier image. And look at what I'm working with now. I want you guys to see this. Look at this image. So now this image right here, when I zoom in on this to just show you guys better example, look at what this image looks like. Do you see these colors, the color cast? It's because when we started with this image, we had started with a JPEG which had already had a lot of damage to the image. All the information was kind of gone. That's why JPEGs in a lot of cases, the file sizes are so much smaller because they're getting rid of a lot of that valuable information. So when you do shoot JPEG, just know that you're going to be limited into when you can edit in post-production. So now I'm going to go back one more time to open up the RAW file and demonstrate that one more time so you guys can kind of see the difference. And I'm going to zoom in on the RAW file as well. So you see this right here. The colors just are not being represented very well. And that's because of the lack of information. So let's go ahead and hop on into this. Let me go ahead and pop open this. Let's see here. This RAW file here. Open here with a RAW file. Alrighty. And now what we're going to do is just bring up the exposure. Look at that. Now we go back here. Some noise. There is some noise. So there's a little bit of noise, but it's so much better. Look at this. It's so much better than it was before. If you can see this. So there you go. So even if I go, let's see on the tree here, and I compare these two trees, look at this. Let me go ahead and move that out of the way. Look at the detail difference in these trees. Do you guys see that? The color's completely missing, but this one's still able to keep some of the detail in some of the tree. Let's see if we can see the cars real quick. Just compare these cars. Much more detail in the car as well. And this is what you're going to get when you have that raw information. So just remember that, guys. When you're shooting in RAW versus when you're shooting in JPEG, RAW is going to always offer you more value, more bang for buck. It's going to take up a lot more space, but in the long run, it's going to be better for you with your color correction. So that's what I really want you guys to remember there. So just remember that when you're shooting in RAW, you're going to have much more information and you're going to be able to do much more in the post-production process. But the trade-off is you're going to have very, very large files. On the other hand, with JPEGs, you're not going to be able to do as much as you can see. You're not going to have as much detail. And when you go to make those changes in post-production, you're going to see it in the image. So just keep that in mind when you're shooting and make sure if you have enough space. I always shoot one JPEG, one RAW if I have enough space. And if I am limited in space, then I will always just shoot RAW. And if I really don't have any space or I really don't care about the images that much, then I'll just shoot in JPEG. But keep that in mind in the future. And I hope this helped you guys out.